Our/ProRevenge father-in-law called me teen mom, so I stole his restaurant. She was just a teen mom who trapped you into marriage, wasn't she? My father-in-law's voice carried across the entire restaurant dining room as he said this to my husband, loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. I sat there, fork halfway to my mouth, watching 30 pairs of eyes turn toward our table. My 3-year-old daughter looked up from her coloring book, confused by the sudden tension. Dad, please, my husband Mark started, but his father held up a dismissive hand. No, I think it's time we address the elephant in the room, Richard continued, his perfectly manicured fingers wrapped around his wine glass. You had your whole future ahead of you, son. Medical school, that internship in Switzerland, and then this girl comes along with her little accident and suddenly you're playing house. The word accident hit me like a slap. My daughter Emma wasn't an accident. She was planned, wanted, and loved by both Mark and me when we were 19 and stupid in love during our sophomore year of college. That's enough, I said quietly, setting down my fork. Emma can hear you. Richard's cold blue eyes fixed on me with that familiar look of disgust. Oh, forgive me. I forgot that teen moms are particularly sensitive about their poor life choices. This wasn't the first time. For 3 years, ever since Mark brought me home to meet his family, Richard had made it his personal mission to remind everyone that I'd gotten pregnant at 19. Never mind that I'd graduated summa cum laude while raising a baby. Never mind that I'd landed an excellent job at a marketing firm. Never mind that Mark and I had been together for 2 years before Emma was even conceived. In Richard's world, I was trailer trash who'd baby-trapped his golden boy son. You know what's funny? Richard continued, warming up now. The man loved an audience, and his own upscale restaurant provided the perfect stage. I keep waiting for the day when Mark wakes up and realizes what he gave up for damaged goods. That's when something inside me snapped. Not the obvious thing, not the humiliation or the rage at being called damaged goods in front of my child. It was something smaller and colder. As Richard gestured grandly with his wine glass, pontificating about my unworthiness, I noticed something. The waitress who'd served our table had been coughing into her hands before touching our plates. The busboy I'd watched earlier had been wiping tables with the same rag he'd used to clean a chair someone's toddler had clearly made a mess on. And when I'd used the restroom earlier, I'd noticed the hand soap dispensers were empty. For a man who never let us forget he owned the most successful fine dining establishment in the city, Richard sure ran a sloppy operation. Mark was making his usual weak protests, begging his father to just drop it, but never actually defending me. Never once telling his father that his wife deserved respect. That the mother of his child wasn't damaged goods. I looked down at Emma, who had gone back to coloring but was pressing way too hard with her crayon. She was absorbing every word, even if she didn't fully understand them yet. You're absolutely right, Richard, I said suddenly, making both men stop mid-argument. I was 19 when I had Emma. That makes me a statistic, doesn't it? Richard smiled triumphantly, thinking he'd finally broken me. He had no idea what he'd actually done. But you know what else makes someone a statistic? I continued, my voice steady as I reached for my purse. Business owners who think they're above certain regulations. Richard's smile faltered slightly, but he was too drunk on his own superiority to catch the warning in my tone. I'm sorry, what are you implying? He asked, leaning back in his chair like a king on his throne. Oh, nothing really, I said, pulling out my phone. I was just thinking about my friend Jessica from college. Remember her, Mark? She works for the health department now. We had lunch last week and she was telling me about how understaffed they are. Apparently, they rely heavily on customer complaints to identify problem establishments. Mark's eyes widened slightly. He knew that look on my face. But Richard was too busy basking in his own cruelty to notice the shift in atmosphere. Are you threatening me, little girl? Richard laughed. Good luck with that. I've been running restaurants longer than you've been alive. This place has never had a single violation. That's when I smiled. Really smiled, for the first time all evening. Never? That's interesting. Because I've been sitting here for 2 hours, and I've seen your staff violate at least 6 health codes. The sick waitress handling food, cross-contamination with cleaning supplies, empty soap dispensers, and that's just what's visible to customers. Richard's face was turning red now. You little. Daddy's getting loud again, Emma whispered, shrinking into her seat. And that was it. The final straw. This man had just scared my 3-year-old daughter with his explosive temper, all because I dared to stand up to him. Mark, take Emma to the car, I said quietly, not taking my eyes off Richard. Sarah, let's just go, Mark pleaded. Don't escalate this. Take Emma to the car. Each word came out like ice chips. Mark looked between his father and me, and for a moment I thought he might actually choose to defend his family. Instead, he scooped up Emma and her coloring book, muttering apologies to his father as he left. Richard and I sat alone at the table, the dinner crowd pretending not to watch our standoff. You think you can intimidate me? Richard hissed, leaning forward. I built this empire from nothing. I have connections you can't even imagine. City council members eat at my other restaurants. The mayor's wife gets her catering from my events company. Connections, I repeated thoughtfully. That must be nice. It probably makes things easier when inspectors come around, doesn't it? A little heads up, maybe some flexibility on reporting deadlines? The color drained from his face so fast I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I don't know what you think you know. I don't think anything yet, Richard. But I'm a very thorough person. You've reminded me of that repeatedly, how I had to work twice as hard in school because of my situation. How I had to be perfect at my job because I couldn't afford any mistakes. You spent 3 years telling me I'm not good enough for your family. I stood up, smoothing my dress with steady hands. The thing about being underestimated is that people stop watching what you're actually doing. They're too busy looking down on you to notice you're taking notes. Richard gripped the edge of the table. If you do anything to damage my business, I'll destroy you. I'll make sure Mark divorces you and gets full custody. Oh. Good night, Richard, I said pleasantly. Thank you for dinner. And for the education. I walked out of that restaurant with my head high, leaving him sputtering threats at my back. He thought he was dealing with a scared little girl. He was about to learn exactly who he'd been messing with. The car ride home was suffocating. Mark gripped the steering wheel like it was a life preserver, stealing glances at me through the rearview mirror while Emma dozed in her car seat. I could practically hear the gears turning in his head, trying to figure out how to smooth things over like he always did. Sarah, I know tonight was bad, but... Not now, Mark. I kept my voice low so we wouldn't wake Emma, but the edge was unmistakable. Not in front of her. He fell silent, and I spent the rest of the drive staring out the window, my mind already working. Richard thought he could threaten my daughter and my marriage? He was about to discover that the teen mom he'd been tormenting had learned a few things about research and documentation in her marketing career. Once we got home and Emma was settled in bed, Mark cornered me in our kitchen. His face was flushed, and I recognized the look. He was gearing up for one of his let's all just get along speeches. Look, I know my father was out of line tonight. Out of line? I turned from the sink to face him fully. Mark, he called our daughter an accident. In public. Again. He's just old-fashioned. You know how he gets when he's had wine. Stop. The word came out sharper than I intended. Just stop making excuses for him. Do you hear yourself right now? Mark ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I used to find endearing. Now it just looked like a man trying to avoid taking a stand. What do you want me to do, Sarah? Cut off my entire family? He pays for Emma's private school. He helped us with a down payment on this house. There it is. I felt something cold settle in my chest. The money. That's why you won't stand up to him. That's not fair. You know I love you and Emma more than anything, but he's still my father. Can't you just ignore him? For Emma's sake? For Emma's sake. The same daughter who'd been shrinking into her seat while her grandfather called her mother damaged goods. I tried ignoring him, Mark. For 3 years, I've smiled and nodded while he humiliated me at every family gathering. I pretended not to hear him tell your cousins that you settled. I've watched him undermine me as a mother, as your wife, and as a human being. And you've let him. Mark's face crumpled. I don't let him do anything. I tell him to stop. You ask him to stop. You beg him to drop it. You never once tell him that what he's saying is wrong. You never defend me, Mark. You just try to manage the situation until it goes away. We stood there in our kitchen, the distance between us feeling like miles instead of feet. This was the conversation we'd been dancing around for years, and I could see the panic in his eyes as he realized we were finally having it. So what happens now? He asked quietly. I thought about Richard's threats. About him promising to destroy me, to take Emma away. About the way Mark had apologized to his father while walking out, but hadn't said a single word of comfort to his wife. Now I'm going to do what I should have done a long time ago, I said. I'm going to protect my daughter. What does that mean? I looked at my husband, really looked at him. The man I'd fallen in love with at 19, who'd held my hand through morning sickness and late-night study sessions. Who'd promised to stand by me no matter what. It means I'm done being the family punching bag. And it means you're going to have to decide which family matters more to you, the one that tears me down, or the one we built together. Mark's phone buzzed. He glanced at it automatically, and his face went pale. It's my dad. He wants to meet for lunch tomorrow. He says we need to discuss your behavior tonight. I almost laughed. Even now, even after everything, Richard thought he could summon his son to strategize about controlling the unruly wife. Are you going? I asked. Mark hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. I have to, Sarah. Maybe I can make him understand. No, Mark. You don't have to. You choose to. And that's when I knew that whatever came next, I'd be facing it alone. I woke up the next morning to the sound of Mark's shower running and the smell of his expensive cologne drifting through our bedroom. He was getting ready for his lunch with Daddy, and the care he was taking with his appearance told me everything about his priorities. Emma bounced into our room in her pajamas, clutching her stuffed elephant. Mommy, can we make pancakes? Of course, baby. I scooped her up, inhaling the sweet scent of her hair. At least one thing in my life was still pure. Mark emerged from the bathroom, adjusting his tie, the navy blue one his mother had given him for Christmas. Even his wardrobe choices were calculated to please his family. I'll probably be back around 3, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. Maybe we can talk then? Figure out how to move forward? Sure, I replied, but we both knew there was nothing to figure out. He'd made his choice the moment he'd agreed to that lunch. After he left, I settled Emma with her pancakes and cartoons, then opened my laptop at the kitchen table. If Mark thought I was going to spend the day wallowing while he and Richard strategized about my behavior, he was about to be very disappointed. I started with the basics. Richard's restaurant empire consisted of 4 establishments, the flagship fine dining restaurant where we'd had dinner, 2 casual bistros, and a catering company. All registered under Blackwood Hospitality Group, with Richard as the primary owner. Public records were a beautiful thing when you knew where to look. Business licenses, health inspection reports, tax filings, most of it was accessible if you were patient enough to navigate the various city and county websites. The health inspection reports were interesting. Richard's flagship restaurant had indeed maintained a spotless record for the past 5 years. Too spotless, actually. In a city where even the most pristine establishments occasionally got dinged for minor violations, Blackwood's had literally 0 citations. Not even a warning about proper food temperature logging. I cross-referenced the inspection dates with the city's database of scheduled versus complaint-driven inspections. Every single inspection at Blackwood's had been scheduled, with at least 2 weeks advance notice. Meanwhile, his competitors were getting surprise visits regularly. Mommy, can I have more syrup? Emma asked, interrupting my research. Just a little bit, sweetheart. I helped her with the syrup bottle, my mind still processing what I'd found. Having connections wasn't illegal, but it certainly explained Richard's arrogance about his perfect record. I dug deeper into the business filings. Something about the corporate structure looked off. Blackwood Hospitality Group had multiple subsidiaries, including something called BH Property Management and Blackwood Consulting Services. The addresses listed for these subsidiaries were just P.O. boxes. My phone rang, startling me out of my research trance. The caller ID showed my sister Jenny's name. Hey, what's up? I answered, keeping my voice cheerful for Emma's benefit. I just heard from Mom about last night. She ran into Mark's aunt at the grocery store, and apparently the whole family is talking about how you threatened Richard. I should have known the Blackwood family gossip network would be in full swing by morning. That's not exactly what happened. I figured. But Sarah, you need to be careful. Mom says they're saying you were unstable, that you made some kind of scene in the restaurant. They're painting you as the crazy daughter-in-law who can't handle family criticism. My blood turned to ice water. They're doing what? I'm just warning you. You know how these rich families close ranks. If they're already spreading stories about your mental state. She didn't need to finish the thought. Richard's threat about custody suddenly felt much more real. In a divorce, especially a nasty one, character assassination was standard strategy. Paint the mother as unstable, unreliable, unfit. Jenny, I need you to do me a favor. If anyone asks you about me, anyone at all, you tell them I'm the most stable person you know. Can you call Mom and Dad too? Make sure they're ready if anyone comes asking questions. Jesus, Sarah, what are you planning? I looked at Emma, happily destroying her pancakes while singing along to her cartoon. My beautiful, innocent daughter who deserved better than a family that saw her as a mistake and her mother as the enemy. I'm planning to win, I said. After I hung up, I stared at my laptop screen, the weight of the situation settling on my shoulders. Richard wasn't just going to wait for me to make a move, he was already making his own. Character assassination, reputation destruction, setting the stage for whatever legal battle might come. But two could play that game. And I'd learned something important about myself over the past 12 hours. I was much better at this than I thought. I spent the rest of the morning methodically screenshotting every business filing I could find, creating a digital paper trail that I saved to 3 different cloud accounts. Emma played quietly beside me, occasionally asking questions about why Mommy was typing so much. I told her I was working on a special project, which wasn't exactly a lie. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from Mark, running late. Dad wants to grab coffee after lunch too. Might be 4 or 5 before I'm home. Of course he did. Richard was probably spending the entire day programming his son, making sure Mark understood exactly how dangerous his unstable wife had become. I could practically script the conversation, asterisk she threatened my business, son. She's clearly having some kind of breakdown. Think about Emma's safety, asterisk. I was still staring at the text when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a woman I didn't recognize, professionally dressed, clipboard in hand, official-looking badge hanging from her neck. Can I help you? I asked through the door, my heart rate spiking. Mrs. Blackwood? I'm Jennifer Martinez from Child Protective Services. We received a call expressing concern about your household, and I'd like to ask you a few questions. The world tilted sideways. Emma looked up from her toys, sensing the change in atmosphere. Who's here, Mommy? Just someone Mommy needs to talk to, baby. Keep playing. I opened the door with shaking hands. I'm sorry, there must be some mistake. What kind of concern? Ms. Martinez consulted her clipboard with practiced efficiency. We received a report that there may be an unstable domestic situation affecting a minor child. The caller mentioned incidents of erratic behavior, public outbursts, and concerns about the child's emotional well-being. Richard. That bastard had actually called CPS on me. Less than 24 hours after our confrontation, he was already executing his custody threat. Ma'am, I can assure you that my daughter is perfectly safe and well cared for, I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. This is clearly some kind of misunderstanding. I'm sure it is, Ms. Martinez said kindly, but she was already looking past me into the house. These calls usually are. But I do need to complete my assessment. May I come in? What choice did I have? Refusing would only make me look guilty of whatever Richard had accused me of. Of course. Emma shrank behind me as the social worker entered, her little hand finding mine. Ms. Martinez's trained eyes swept over our living room, taking in the scattered toys, the breakfast dishes I hadn't cleared yet, the laptop still open on the kitchen table displaying business records. Is your husband home, Mrs. Blackwood? He's at lunch with his father. He should be back soon. The irony wasn't lost on me that Mark was probably discussing my instability while CPS questioned me in our living room. And how would you describe your relationship with your father-in-law? There it was. The trap Richard had laid so carefully. If I told the truth, that he'd been emotionally abusing me for years, I'd sound paranoid and vindictive. If I downplayed it, I'd be lying to a government official conducting an investigation into my fitness as a mother. We've had some disagreements, I said carefully. Ms. Martinez made a note. The caller mentioned that you made threats against his business last night. In front of your daughter. Emma's grip on my hand tightened. She remembered the restaurant, the shouting, the way Daddy had carried her out while Mommy and Grandpa Richard stared at each other across the table. There were no threats, I said firmly. We had a disagreement about family matters. But I would never threaten anyone, and I certainly wouldn't expose my daughter to anything inappropriate. Can you tell me about your daughter's routine? How she's adjusting to any recent changes in the household? Changes in the household. Like parents who barely spoke to each other anymore? Like a father who was currently choosing his daddy over his family? Like a mother who was plotting to destroy her in-law's business empire? Emma's routine is very stable, I lied smoothly. She goes to Montessori school, she has playdates with friends, we read together every night. She's a happy, well-adjusted child. As if to contradict me, Emma chose that moment to pipe up, Mommy, why was Grandpa Richard so mad at you? Did you do something bad? Ms. Martinez's pen paused over her clipboard. Grandpa Richard was mad? I felt the walls closing in. Every word out of my mouth could be used against me later. Every detail Emma innocently provided could be twisted into evidence of an unfit home environment. My father-in-law can be intense, I said slowly. Sometimes adult conversations get heated, but Emma was never in any danger. But Daddy looked scared, Emma continued, oblivious to the minefield she was dancing through. And you had that angry face you get when I don't clean my room. Perfect. My 3-year-old had just told a social worker that I looked angry enough to scare my husband. Ms. Martinez spent another 20 minutes going through her checklist, examining Emma's bedroom, checking our refrigerator, asking questions about discipline and childcare arrangements. Through it all, I felt like I was taking a test where I didn't know the right answers. After she left, promising to follow up within a few days, I locked the door and leaned against it, my legs shaking. Richard had just declared war. And Mark wasn't even here to see what his family was doing to ours. I called Mark 6 times after the social worker left. 6 times straight to voicemail while I paced our living room, Emma asking me why I looked all worried and when Daddy was coming home. Each unanswered ring felt like another nail in the coffin of our marriage. When he finally walked through the door at 5:30 p.m., reeking of expensive wine and his father's cologne, I was ready to explode. We need to talk. Now. I pointed toward our bedroom, away from Emma's ears. Mark's face was flushed, his eyes slightly glassy. They hadn't just had lunch and coffee, they'd been day drinking and plotting. Sarah, before you say anything, I think we need to discuss some boundaries. Your father called CPS on me. That stopped him cold. The patronizing speech he'd obviously rehearsed died on his lips. What? Child Protective Services showed up here this afternoon while you were bonding with Daddy. Someone called in a report about my erratic behavior and unstable domestic situation. Want to guess who? Mark sank onto our bed, his face going pale. There's no way. He wouldn't. A social worker spent an hour in our house, Mark. Questioning Emma. Taking notes about our marriage, our family dynamics, my mental state. All because your father decided to get ahead of whatever he thinks I'm planning. But why would he call CPS? That doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense. I was struggling to keep my voice down. He threatened me last night, remember? Said he'd make sure you divorced me and got full custody. This is how it starts. Plant seeds about the unstable mother, get official documentation of concerns, build a case. Mark rubbed his face with both hands. Okay, even if, and I'm not saying he did, but even if Dad made some kind of complaint, it's just a misunderstanding. We'll clear it up. The casual way he dismissed it, like this was just another inconvenient mess to smooth over, made my blood boil. Clear it up how, Mark? The report is already filed. There's already a case number. Emma is already in their system as a child of concern. Do you understand what this could mean for my career? For our family? You're being dramatic. I'm being dramatic? I stared at my husband like I was seeing him for the first time. Mark, your father just weaponized child services against your wife, and you think I'm being dramatic? He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he finally looked up, I saw something that made my stomach drop. He showed me some things today, Sarah. About your research yesterday. Screenshots you took of business records, city databases you accessed. He's concerned you might be obsessing over him. That maybe the stress of everything has made you lose perspective. I felt the air leave my lungs. Richard had been watching me. Somehow, he'd figured out exactly what I'd been researching and spun it into evidence of obsessive, stalker-like behavior. You believe him? It wasn't a question. I don't know what to believe. You've been acting different lately, Sarah. Angry all the time, plotting something. And now there's a CPS investigation and you're talking about destroying his business. Maybe we should consider counseling, or get out. Mark blinked. What? Get out of our bedroom. Go call your daddy and tell him phase 1 worked perfectly. His unstable daughter-in-law is acting erratic again. Sarah, that's not. Get out. Emma's voice drifted down the hallway. Mommy? Daddy? Why are you yelling? Mark looked toward her voice, then back at me, something like guilt flickering across his features. But not enough guilt to actually choose his family over his father. I'll sleep in the guest room tonight, he said quietly. Maybe we can talk tomorrow when you've calmed down. When I've calmed down. Like this was all just female hysteria that would pass with a good night's sleep. After he left, I locked the bedroom door and opened my laptop with shaking hands. Richard wanted to play psychological warfare? Fine. But he'd just made one critical mistake. He'd shown me exactly how high the stakes really were. And I was done playing defense. The next morning, I woke up to an empty house. Mark had taken Emma to school without saying goodbye, probably his way of avoiding another confrontation. I found a note on the kitchen counter, took Emma to breakfast first. Thought you might need space to think. Space to think. As if 3 years of humiliation required more contemplation. I was still staring at the note when my phone rang. Unknown number. Mrs. Blackwood? This is Detective Harris with the Financial Crimes Unit. We'd like to schedule a time to speak with you about some allegations that have been brought to our attention. My stomach dropped. Allegations? Someone filed a report claiming you've been conducting unauthorized surveillance of local businesses, possibly for purposes of extortion or harassment. We're required to follow up on these types of complaints. Richard wasn't just playing defense, he was systematically destroying my credibility from every angle. CPS, the police, probably the State Bar Association next if he found out I'd been researching legal precedents. I haven't done anything illegal, detective. I was simply. Ma'am, I'd prefer to discuss this in person. Would this afternoon work for you? After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen feeling the walls close in. In less than 48 hours, Richard had turned me into someone under investigation by multiple agencies. Every move I'd made, every search I'd conducted, was being reframed as evidence of criminal intent. But something nagged at me. How had he known exactly what I'd researched? I'd been careful, used private browsing, accessed everything through legitimate public databases. Unless. I opened my laptop and checked the browser history. Everything was there. Every business filing, every health department database search, every property record. Mark's laptop was linked to the same cloud account, he could see every website I'd visited. My own husband had been spying on me. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. While I'd been trying to protect our family, Mark had been reporting my every move back to his father. No wonder Richard had stayed one step ahead. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Sarah, this is Mark's mom. Can you call me? It's important. Helen. Mark's mother had never reached out to me directly before. In 3 years, our relationship had been polite but distant. She followed Richard's lead on most things, but she'd never been outright cruel. I hesitated, then called her back. Sarah, thank God. Helen's voice was strained, almost whispered. I can't talk long, but I needed to warn you. Richard is planning something else. He's meeting with his lawyer this afternoon about emergency custody proceedings. Emergency custody. My hand started shaking. Helen, I need you to know, I'm not unstable. I would never hurt Emma or... I know that, she interrupted. You think I don't see what Richard does to you? How he talks about you. I've been watching this for 3 years, and I'm ashamed of myself for staying quiet. Then why are you warning me now? There was a long pause. Because Emma called me last night. She was scared because Mommy and Daddy were fighting, and she wanted to know if you and Mark were getting divorced like her friend Katie's parents. My 3-year-old was already processing the destruction of our family while the adults played their power games. Helen, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Has Richard ever mentioned anything about his business dealings? Anything that seemed questionable? Another pause, longer this time. Why do you ask? Because I think your husband isn't as clean as he pretends to be. And if he wants to destroy my family, maybe it's time someone looked closely at his. Sarah, be very careful. Richard has more resources than you know. He's not just wealthy, he's connected. Judges, politicians, police commissioners. If you come at him, you'd better not miss. The line went dead, but her message was crystal clear. This wasn't just about a family feud anymore. This was about survival. I sat in my car outside the police station for 20 minutes before finding the courage to walk inside. Detective Harris turned out to be a tired-looking woman in her 40s who offered me coffee and spoke in the careful, neutral tone cops used when they weren't sure if you were victim or perpetrator. Mrs. Blackwood, we've received some concerning reports about your recent activities. Can you tell me about your interest in Blackwood Hospitality Group's business records? It's my father-in-law's company, I said carefully. I was doing some research after a family disagreement. What kind of research? I chose my words like I was defusing a bomb. Public records. Business filings. Health inspection reports. Everything I accessed is available to any citizen. Detective Harris consulted her notes. The complainant alleges you've been conducting surveillance, taking photographs of his establishments, and making threats about exposing confidential business information. My mouth fell open. That's completely untrue. I hadn't even been to any of his other restaurants since this started. So you admit you've been to his restaurant recently? We had dinner there 2 nights ago. As a family. There were witnesses. About 30 of them, all of whom probably remembered the crazy daughter-in-law making a scene. And during this dinner, did you threaten Mr. Blackwood's business? I thought about that moment, the way Richard's face had changed when I mentioned my friend at the health department. I may have mentioned that I had connections in regulatory agencies. But it wasn't a threat, it was just conversation. Even as I said it, I knew how it sounded. Detective Harris made another note. Mrs. Blackwood, I'm going to be direct with you. Mr. Blackwood is a respected businessman with significant community ties. If you're planning some kind of retaliation against him or his businesses, I strongly advise you to reconsider. What about his retaliation against me? The words tumbled out before I could stop them. He called CPS on me yesterday. He's trying to destroy my marriage and take my daughter. Doesn't that matter? Do you have proof that Mr. Blackwood made the CPS report? Of course I didn't. Richard was too smart to leave fingerprints on his attacks. Mrs. Blackwood, my advice is to focus on your family situation and leave Mr. Blackwood's businesses alone. Sometimes the best way to protect yourself is to step back from a fight you can't win. I left the police station feeling like I'd been carved hollow. Every avenue I turned down, Richard was already there, controlling the narrative, positioning himself as the victim of a vindictive daughter-in-law's harassment campaign. But Detective Harris had given me something useful, even if she didn't realize it. She'd called Richard a respected businessman with significant community ties. The emphasis she'd put on those words suggested this wasn't the first time his name had come up in her office. I was pulling into my driveway when I saw Mark's car in the garage. He was home early, which meant either he'd taken a half day to deal with his unstable wife, or something else had happened. I found him in the kitchen, pacing while he talked on the phone. When he saw me, his face went white. I have to call you back, Dad. He hung up quickly, but not before I heard Richard's voice barking instructions through the speaker. Sarah, we need to talk. Let me guess. Daddy has a new strategy? Mark's jaw tightened. Emma's school called. They want to meet with both of us tomorrow. Apparently, she's been telling her classmates that her family is breaking apart and asking if she's going to have to choose between Mommy and Daddy like in the movies. My heart shattered. While I'd been fighting Richard's war games, my daughter had been processing trauma I hadn't even realized she was experiencing. Mark, this has to stop. Whatever your father is planning, whatever legal moves he's making, Emma is the one paying the price. I know, he said quietly. That's why I think, maybe we should consider what Dad suggested. Just temporarily. Until things calm down. What did he suggest? Mark couldn't meet my eyes. That maybe Emma should stay with them for a few weeks. Just until we sort out our marriage issues and the CPS situation gets resolved. Richard wanted my daughter. Not just custody and a future divorce, he wanted her now, while I was under investigation, while my parenting was being questioned. Absolutely not. Sarah, be reasonable. They have resources, stability. Emma loves her grandparents, and it would show CPS that we're prioritizing her well-being over our personal drama. I stared at my husband, searching for any trace of the man I'd fallen in love with. You're actually considering handing our daughter over to the man who called her an accident. It's just temporary. No, Mark. It's checkmate. Once Emma is in their house, under their influence, with their lawyers managing the situation, do you really think I'll ever get her back? Mark's phone buzzed with a text. He glanced at it reflexively, and I caught sight of the message. Meeting moved to 6 p.m. Remember what we discussed. You have another meeting with him tonight. It's not what you think. Then what is it? What are you two planning now? Mark's silence told me everything I needed to know. My husband hadn't just chosen sides in this war. He'd enlisted as Richard's lieutenant. I watched Mark's face crumble as the weight of what he'd just revealed settled between us. The meeting tonight, the careful coordination with Richard, the way he'd been checking his phone constantly, my husband was actively working against me. Sarah, you don't understand the pressure I'm under, he started, but I held up a hand to stop him. Emma, I called toward the living room where she was watching cartoons. Go pack your backpack, sweetheart. We're going to have a sleepover at Aunt Jenny's house. Right now? Emma appeared in the doorway, confused but excited at the unexpected adventure. Right now. Pack your favorite pajamas and Mr. Elephant. Mark stepped forward, panic flashing across his face. Sarah, wait. You can't just take her. I'm not taking her anywhere permanent. But I'm not leaving her here while you and your father strategize about my fitness as a mother. I kept my voice level, but inside I was screaming. Emma, go pack. We're leaving in 10 minutes. As soon as she disappeared upstairs, Mark grabbed my arm. This is exactly the kind of behavior they're worried about. Erratic decisions, taking Emma without discussion. Taking my daughter to her aunt's house for one night is erratic? I shook his hand off. What's erratic is a father who spies on his wife for his daddy. What's erratic is planning secret meetings about your child's custody without telling the other parent. I'm trying to protect our family. By destroying it? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Mark, do you hear yourself? You're protecting our family by helping your father take Emma away from me? His phone buzzed again. Another text from Richard, probably wondering why his son hadn't confirmed the evening's battle plans yet. Answer it, I said quietly. Tell Daddy his plan hit a snag. Mark stared at his phone, then at me, something like recognition finally dawning in his eyes. Maybe he was seeing himself clearly for the first time in days, a grown man taking orders from his father about his own marriage and child. I never wanted it to go this far, he whispered. But you let it. Every step of the way, you chose him over us. The CPS call, the police report, whatever you're planning tonight, you enabled all of it. Emma bounded back downstairs with her backpack, Mr. Elephant tucked securely under her arm. Ready, Mommy. I knelt down to her level. Emma, you know Mommy and Daddy have been having some grown-up problems, right? She nodded solemnly. Like Katie's parents had before they got different houses. The casual way she accepted it broke my heart. 3 years old, and she already understood that families could shatter without warning. We're working on fixing things, I lied. But tonight we're going to have fun with Aunt Jenny. Maybe we'll make cookies. Can I call Daddy before bed? I looked up at Mark, whose face was wet with tears he was trying to hide. Of course you can call Daddy. As I loaded Emma into the car, Mark stood in our driveway looking lost. His phone was buzzing incessantly now, Richard wondering where his lieutenant had gone. Sarah, please don't do this. Come back after the meeting. We can figure something out. The meeting where you and your father decide Emma's future without me? I don't think so. I was backing out of the driveway when Mark called out desperately, he has a file, Sarah. About you. Photos, documentation of everything you've researched, character witnesses who'll say you've been obsessed with him for months. If this goes to court. I stopped the car. What kind of photos? I don't know. He just said he's been documenting everything since that night at the restaurant. Richard hadn't just been planning his counterattack, he'd been building a comprehensive case against me. While I thought I was being clever with my research, he'd been 3 steps ahead, turning my every move into evidence of harassment and instability. Mommy, why does Daddy look sad? Emma asked from her car seat. I caught Mark's eyes one last time through the windshield. My husband, who'd promised to love and protect me, who'd held me while I cried through the hardest parts of new motherhood, who'd once told me I was the strongest person he knew. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that make them sad, baby. As we drove away, I realized Richard's real genius wasn't just in attacking me, it was in turning my own husband into the weapon. Jenny's house felt like a sanctuary, but I knew it was temporary. While Emma giggled over cookie dough and cartoons, I sat at my sister's kitchen table trying to process how completely I'd been outmaneuvered. He's been building a file on me, I told Jenny as we watched Emma through the doorway. Photos, documentation, probably recording our conversations for all I know. What kind of photos could he possibly have? I don't know, but Mark looked terrified when he mentioned it. Like Richard has something really damaging. Jenny poured herself another glass of wine. Okay, worst case scenario, what could he have photographed that would look bad in court? I ran through the past few weeks in my mind. Maybe me sitting in my car outside his restaurants? I did drive by a couple of them while I was researching. Or maybe he caught me taking pictures of health code violations with my phone that night at dinner? But even as I said it, something felt off. Richard's confidence, Mark's terror, the way the police detective had seemed almost sympathetic when she warned me to back down, it all pointed to something bigger than photos of me being a concerned customer. My phone rang, interrupting my spiral. Unknown number again. Mrs. Blackwood? This is attorney Patricia Chin. I represent several restaurant owners in the city, and I believe we need to talk. My blood went cold. I'm sorry, what is this about? I understand you've been conducting some kind of investigation into my clients' businesses. I'd like to discuss a resolution before this escalates further. Multiple restaurant owners. Richard wasn't just protecting himself, he'd somehow convinced other business owners that I was a threat to all of them. Ms. Chen, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I haven't investigated anyone's business except Mrs. Blackwood, I'm going to be very direct with you. My clients have security footage of you photographing their establishments, accessing their dumpsters for financial documents, and questioning their employees about internal operations. This constitutes harassment and possibly corporate espionage. The room started spinning. That's impossible. I've never done any of those things. Are you saying the security footage is fabricated? Security footage. Of me doing things I'd never actually done. My hands started shaking as the pieces clicked into place. I need to see this footage. I'd be happy to arrange that. My office, tomorrow at 2 p.m. I suggest you bring your own attorney. After I hung up, Jenny was staring at me with wide eyes. Sarah, what the hell is going on? He's framing me. The words came out as a whisper. Richard isn't just documenting what I actually did, he's creating evidence of crimes I never committed. That's insane. How could he fake security footage of you? I thought about Mark's nervous energy lately, his insistence on handling certain errands alone, the way he'd been asking me to stay home with Emma while he ran out for things we didn't really need. Mark, I breathed. He's been setting me up. All those times he said he was running errands, he was probably positioning me near these restaurants, making sure I was in the area when incidents happened. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark, please come home. Dad's meeting is over. We need to talk about what happens next. What happens next? Like my future was something they decided without me. Jenny, I need you to do something for me. Call everyone, Mom, Dad, your friends, anyone who might be willing to provide character references. Tell them they might get calls asking about my mental state, my relationship with Emma, whether I've seemed obsessed or unstable lately. You're scaring me, Sarah. I looked at my daughter, completely absorbed in her cartoon, innocent and trusting that Mommy would fix whatever was wrong in their world. Good, I said. Because I'm terrified. And I'm starting to think being scared is the only rational response to what Richard's actually capable of. Emma wandered over, cookie crumbs on her pajamas. Mommy, when are we going home? I pulled her onto my lap, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair. Soon, baby. Mommy just has to figure some things out first. But as I held my daughter, I realized that home might not exist anymore. Richard hadn't just declared war on me, he'd systematically demolished every safe space I thought I had. Including my own marriage. The next morning, I woke up on Jenny's couch to the sound of Emma giggling in the kitchen and my phone buzzing incessantly. 7 missed calls from Mark, 3 from unknown numbers, and a text that made my stomach drop. Sarah, it's Helen. Richard knows where you are. He's coming. I bolted upright, my heart hammering. Through the kitchen doorway, I could see Emma happily eating cereal while Jenny made coffee, both of them blissfully unaware that our sanctuary had been compromised. Jenny, I called, trying to keep my voice steady. We need to leave. Now. Before she could respond, I heard the rumble of an expensive engine in her driveway. Through the front window, I saw Richard's black Mercedes pulling up, with Mark's car right behind it. They'd brought reinforcements. Emma, sweetie, come here, I said, scooping her up as the doorbell rang. Jenny looked between me and the door, confused. Sarah, what? Mrs. Blackwood? A woman's voice called through the door. This is Detective Martinez, Family Services. We need to speak with you immediately. Not just Richard and Mark. They brought CPS back into it. Mommy, why do you look scared again? Emma whispered against my shoulder. The doorbell rang again, more insistently. Mrs. Blackwood, we know you're inside. We have reports of a potential custodial interference situation. Custodial interference. They were accusing me of kidnapping my own daughter by taking her to her aunt's house for one night. Jenny opened the door before I could stop her, and suddenly my sister's small living room was filled with people. Detective Martinez with her clipboard, Mark looking like he hadn't slept, and Richard wearing the satisfied expression of a man who just cornered his prey. There she is, Richard said, pointing at me like I was a fugitive. Officer, as you can see, she's clearly attempting to flee with the child. I'm not fleeing anywhere, I said, setting Emma down but keeping her close. I brought my daughter to her aunt's house for a sleepover. Detective Martinez consulted her notes. Mrs. Blackwood, you left your residence yesterday evening without notifying your husband of your intended destination or return time. Given the ongoing investigation into your household stability, this raises serious concerns. I texted him where we were going, I protested, but even as I said it, I realized how weak it sounded. I'd been so angry, so focused on getting away from Mark's betrayal, that I hadn't thought about how it would look to the authorities. Sarah, please, Mark stepped forward, his face pleading. Just come home. We can work this out as a family. Like we worked out your secret meetings with your father? Like we worked out the fake security footage he's apparently created? Richard's smile sharpened. Fake footage? That's a very serious accusation, Sarah. I hope you're prepared to substantiate that claim in court. The way he said it, so confident and calm, made me realize he'd been recording this conversation too. Every panicked word out of my mouth was more ammunition for his case that I was delusional and unstable. Mommy, I want to go home, Emma said quietly, picking up on the tension radiating from every adult in the room. Of course you do, sweetheart, Richard said, crouching down to her level. Grandpa Richard is here to make sure you get home safely. The possessive way he said home, like he was already planning which home that would be, sent ice through my veins. Detective Martinez made another note. Mrs. Blackwood, I'm strongly recommending that you return with your husband today. Any further incidents could result in emergency protective custody measures. I looked around the room at the faces staring back at me, Richard triumphant, Mark guilty but complicit, Detective Martinez professionally concerned, Jenny horrified and helpless. They'd backed me into a corner so perfectly that even complying felt like surrender. But with Emma's small hand in mine, I realized I was out of choices. The ride home was suffocating. Emma sat between Mark and me in the backseat of Richard's Mercedes, a power move that wasn't lost on anyone. Detective Martinez had suggested this arrangement to ensure family unity, but I knew whose idea it really was. Richard drove with the casual confidence of a man who just won a major battle, occasionally glancing at me in the rearview mirror with those cold blue eyes. Mark stared out his window, refusing to meet my gaze, while Emma played quietly with Mr. Elephant, sensing the toxic undercurrents flowing around her. You know, Sarah, Richard said conversationally, like we were discussing the weather, I've been thinking about our situation. It occurs to me that you might benefit from some professional help. Postpartum depression can manifest years after birth, especially in women who were unprepared for motherhood. The clinical way he delivered the psychological evaluation made my skin crawl. He was already building his narrative for the custody hearing, the unstable teen mom whose mental health had finally cracked under the pressure of responsibilities she'd never been equipped to handle. I'm not depressed, I said quietly, aware that Emma was listening to every word. Of course you don't think you are. That's the insidious nature of these conditions. The paranoia, the obsessive behaviors, the persecution complex, it all feels completely rational to the person experiencing it. Mark's jaw tightened, but he still said nothing. My husband was letting his father perform a psychological dissection of his wife while their daughter sat inches away. Daddy, what's postpartum mean? Emma asked innocently. The silence in the car was deafening. Even Richard seemed to realize he'd crossed a line by conducting his character assassination in front of a 3-year-old. It's just a grown-up word, baby, Mark finally said, his voice hoarse. When we pulled into our driveway, I noticed another car I didn't recognize, a sleek gray sedan with government plates. Richard's smile widened as he noticed my reaction. I took the liberty of arranging a family consultation, he announced. Dr. Reeves is a highly respected child psychologist. She's here to assess Emma's emotional state and ensure she's processing recent events in a healthy way. My blood turned to ice. They'd brought in a child psychologist without my knowledge or consent. Everything Emma said to this woman could be used as evidence in a custody proceeding. You can't just spring a psychological evaluation on a 3-year-old, I protested. It's not an evaluation, Richard said smoothly. It's a wellness check. Unless, of course, you have some reason to object to a professional ensuring Emma's mental health. The trap was perfect. Object to the child psychologist, and I looked like a mother hiding something. Agree to it, and Emma would be questioned by a stranger who'd been handpicked by Richard's team. Inside the house, Dr. Reeves waited in our living room, a severe-looking woman with steel-gray hair and the kind of measured smile that never reached her eyes. She'd already spread out toys and art supplies on our coffee table, transforming our space into her clinical domain. Mrs. Blackwood, she stood to shake my hand with professional warmth that felt rehearsed. I understand there's been some family stress lately. I thought it might help Emma to have someone neutral to talk to. Neutral. Right. A child psychologist brought in by my father-in-law's legal team was anything but neutral. Emma, sweetheart, Dr. Reeves crouched down to my daughter's level. Would you like to draw some pictures with me? We could draw your family, or your house, or anything that makes you happy. Emma looked up at me uncertainly. She was smart enough to sense that this wasn't a normal playdate, but too young to understand the implications of whatever she might say or draw. It's okay, baby, I said, even though nothing about this was okay. You can play with Dr. Reeves. As Emma settled onto the floor with the art supplies, I caught Richard watching me with satisfaction. He'd orchestrated this perfectly, using my own daughter to gather evidence against me, and there was absolutely nothing I could do to stop it without looking obstructive and guilty. Mark touched my shoulder, but I jerked away from him. He'd lost the right to offer comfort the moment he'd chosen sides. This won't take long, Dr. Reeves said pleasantly, already pulling out her notepad as Emma picked up a crayon. But I knew better. This wasn't just going to take long, it was going to change everything. Dr. Reeves worked with practiced efficiency, asking Emma seemingly innocent questions while she colored. Can you tell me about your house, sweetie? Who lives there with you? Mommy and Daddy and me, Emma said, carefully staying inside the lines of her drawing. And Mr. Elephant, but he's not real people. That sounds nice. And do Mommy and Daddy seem happy at home? I felt my pulse spike, but forced myself to stay silent. Any interruption would be noted as interference. Emma paused her coloring, considering the question with the seriousness only a 3-year-old could muster. Sometimes they talk in angry whispers when they think I'm sleeping. Dr. Reeves made a note. Angry whispers. That must be confusing for you. Like when Daddy talks to Grandpa Richard on the phone. They whisper talk about Mommy a lot. Mark's face went ashen. Even Richard looked uncomfortable as his granddaughter innocently exposed their conspiracy with the brutal honesty of childhood. Tell me about Grandpa Richard, Dr. Reeves continued, clearly sensing fertile ground. He has fancy restaurants, and he says Mommy was too young to have me. But I like being here, so I don't know why that's bad. The room fell silent except for the scratch of Emma's crayon. My 3-year-old had just summarized the entire family dynamic with devastating clarity. Dr. Reeves glanced at me, then at Richard, something shifting in her professional demeanor. Emma, when adults talk about Mommy being young, how does that make you feel? Sad for Mommy. She gets that hurt face like when I accidentally broke her favorite cup. I bit my lip to keep from crying. Emma had been watching me absorb years of emotional abuse, cataloging every moment I tried to hide my pain from her. And how do you feel when Mommy and Daddy whisper fight? Emma set down her crayon and looked directly at me. Scared they're going to get different houses like Katie's parents. Then I won't know where to live. The devastating simplicity of it hung in the air. This child was already processing the trauma of family dissolution while the adults in her life played power games around her. Dr. Reeves made more notes, but her questions had taken on a different tone. Emma, do you feel safe at home with Mommy? Yes. Mommy reads to me and makes good pancakes and hugs me when I have bad dreams. And with Daddy? Daddy's sad a lot now. He talks on the phone more than playing with me. I watched Richard's confident expression begin to crumble as his psychological evaluation backfired spectacularly. Emma wasn't revealing an unstable mother, she was exposing a father more concerned with family politics than his daughter's emotional needs. One more question, sweetie. If you could change anything about your family, what would it be? Emma considered this seriously, then picked up a black crayon and drew a thick line through part of her family picture. I would make Grandpa Richard stop saying mean things about Mommy so Daddy wouldn't be sad anymore. The black line had crossed out a figure that was clearly meant to be Richard. Dr. Reeves closed her notepad with a sharp snap. I think that's sufficient for today. But as she packed up her materials, I caught her shooting pointed looks at Richard, then at Mark. The child psychologist he'd brought in to document my unfitness as a mother had instead recorded a 3-year-old's testimony about emotional abuse and family dysfunction, with Richard as the primary catalyst. Thank you, Dr. Reeves, Richard said stiffly. When can we expect a report? You'll receive my professional assessment within 48 hours, she replied, her voice notably cooler than when she'd arrived. After she left, Richard turned to me with barely controlled fury. His perfect plan had just imploded in the most humiliating way possible, destroyed by the honest observations of the child he dismissed as an accident. This isn't over, he said quietly. But for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. Richard had finally miscalculated. That evening, after Richard stormed out and Dr. Reeves's damning observations hung in the air like smoke, I thought we might finally have a chance to breathe. Emma was in bed, exhausted from the day's emotional chaos, and Mark was sitting across from me at our kitchen table looking like a man who just watched his world implode. Sarah, he started, but his phone buzzed with an incoming call. Richard's name flashed on the screen. Don't answer it, I said quietly. Mark stared at the phone, his finger hovering over the screen as it continued to ring. For a moment, I thought he might actually choose us over his father for once. He answered it. Dad, I don't think tonight is, Mark began, but I could hear Richard's voice cutting him off, sharp and urgent even through the phone speaker. Mark's face went pale as he listened. Are you sure? When did this happen? I felt ice settle in my stomach. Whatever Richard was telling him, it was bad news for me. Okay, yes, I understand. We'll be ready. Mark hung up, his hands shaking slightly. What now? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Someone broke into Dad's restaurant tonight. The flagship location. They smashed windows, destroyed the computer system, and spray-painted threats on the walls. The implication hung between us like a loaded weapon. And he thinks I did it. Sarah, you have to understand how this looks. You threatened his business, you've been researching his operations, and now this happens right after the worst day he's had in years. Mark, I've been here all evening. Emma and I came straight home from Jenny's with you and your father. How could I have possibly? I know that. But Dad says the security footage shows someone who looks like you. Same height, same build, wearing clothes similar to what you had on yesterday. My mouth went dry. He has security footage of me breaking into his restaurant? That's what he says. The police are on their way to review it. I thought about Dr. Reeves' session, how Emma's innocent honesty had destroyed Richard's narrative about the unstable mother. How his confident smirk had melted into barely controlled rage when his own psychological expert had essentially testified in my favor. He's escalating, I realized. The child psychologist backfired, so now he's creating a criminal case against me. Mark rubbed his face with both hands. You're saying my father broke into his own restaurant and somehow faked security footage to frame you? I'm saying your father has spent the last week creating fake evidence of me harassing other restaurants. Why would this be different? But even as I said it, I could see Mark struggling to believe it. The idea that Richard would destroy his own property just to frame me seemed too extreme, too desperate. My phone rang, jolting us both. Detective Harris's name appeared on the screen. Mrs. Blackwood, I need you to come down to the station immediately for questioning regarding a breaking and entering incident. Detective, I was home all evening. My husband can verify. Ma'am, we have security footage that appears to show you at the scene. I strongly suggest you bring an attorney. After I hung up, Mark and I sat in silence, the weight of Richard's latest move settling around us like a closing trap. What if he's been planning this all along? I whispered. What if everything, the CPS calls, the fake restaurant footage, even bringing in Dr. Reeves, was just set up for this moment? Mark's phone buzzed with a text. He glanced at it, and whatever he saw made him go even paler. What is it? He turned the phone toward me. The message was from Richard. The security footage is very clear. I'm afraid Sarah has finally crossed a line we can't ignore. Emergency custody hearing scheduled for tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. I stared at the text, my hands shaking as the final piece of Richard's plan clicked into place. He hadn't just been discrediting me, he'd been building toward this moment. A criminal case that would guarantee him immediate custody of Emma while I sat in jail. Mark, I said quietly, you have to choose. Right now. Because in 12 hours, your father is going to try to take Emma away from me permanently. Mark looked between his phone and my face, and I saw the exact moment he realized that his father hadn't just been protecting the family. He'd been destroying it. The next morning, I sat in the courthouse hallway at 8:45 a.m. with a court-appointed attorney I'd met 15 minutes earlier, watching Richard's legal team file past in their expensive suits. Mark sat across the hallway, his loyalty apparently still undecided even after everything. Then I saw her. Dr. Reeves, walking purposefully toward Richard's group with a thick folder in her hands. My heart sank, she was going to testify for them after all. But instead of joining Richard's team, she walked directly to my attorney. Mr. Rodriguez? I'm Dr. Patricia Reeves. I have some additional findings that weren't included in my preliminary report. Richard's lead attorney looked confused. Dr. Reeves, I thought we were clear about your testimony. My testimony will be based on my professional observations, nothing more, she said coolly. And those observations are quite concerning, though perhaps not in the way you expected. When we entered the courtroom, Judge Martinez looked tired already, probably anticipating another messy custody dispute. Richard sat behind his legal team looking confident, while I tried not to throw up. Your Honor, Richard's attorney began, we have compelling evidence that Mrs. Blackwood has engaged in criminal harassment, culminating in destruction of property. The security footage clearly shows. Objection, my attorney interrupted. Before we discuss any footage, I'd like Dr. Reeves to present her psychological assessment. Dr. Reeves stood with professional composure. Your Honor, I conducted an evaluation of a minor child yesterday. While I was initially asked to assess potential instability in the home environment, my findings were quite different than anticipated. She opened her folder. The child clearly articulates that her primary source of anxiety stems from her grandfather's verbal abuse of her mother, which she's witnessed repeatedly. She expressed specific fear that Grandpa Richard's mean words were causing her father distress and potentially breaking up her family. Richard's confident expression began to crack. Furthermore, Dr. Reeves continued, when asked to draw her family, the child spontaneously crossed out the grandfather figure, stating she wished he would stop saying mean things. This is highly unusual behavior and suggests a child who feels psychologically unsafe around the petitioner. Your Honor, Richard's attorney interjected desperately, regardless of family dynamics, we have clear evidence of criminal behavior. About that footage, Judge Martinez said dryly. I've reviewed the police report filed this morning. It seems there's some question about its authenticity. My heart stopped. This morning? Detective Harris stood up from the gallery. Your Honor, after reviewing the timestamp data on the security footage, we discovered significant irregularities. The metadata shows the footage was edited and compiled from multiple sources over several days. We're now investigating this as a case of filing a false police report and insurance fraud. Richard shot to his feet. That's impossible. I was the victim of. Mr. Blackwood, Judge Martinez's voice cut through his protest like ice. You'll have your chance to address these allegations with Detective Harris. Right now, I'm more concerned about your fitness to have any contact with this child. I watched in amazement as Richard's empire crumbled in real time. Dr. Reeves' honest assessment, the detective's investigation, and apparently Mark's midnight decision to finally tell the truth about his father's manipulation had converged into perfect justice. Based on the evidence presented, Judge Martinez concluded, I'm denying the petition for emergency custody and ordering a full investigation into Mr. Richard Blackwood's conduct. Furthermore, I'm granting Mrs. Blackwood a restraining order pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. As the gavel fell, I felt 3 years of abuse and manipulation finally lift from my shoulders. Richard was escorted out by Detective Harris, his threats and bluster finally silenced. Mark approached me hesitantly. Sarah, I know I have a lot to make up for. Yes, I said simply. You do. But at least now we can try. Emma was waiting at Jenny's house when I picked her up, and for the first time in months, I could honestly tell her everything was going to be okay. Richard's restaurant empire eventually collapsed under the weight of the fraud investigation, but that was just justice. My family, that was everything.